All right, so we are here on another episode of the Late Afternoon Show. I am your host, Tim, and I am tickled, energized, enthused, just crazy excited that we have... Okay, before I even tell them, a lot of folks ask me, it's like, Tim, what's your day job? Like, they see me on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, I'm doing all these things, and it's like, Tim, do you work? So yes, I do work. I actually work at Adventist Health, and I'm leading the leadership residency program, and then Adventist Health has been doing so much by way of like just their community involvement, by way of their employee engagement, just very, very innovative in all the stuff that they're doing. And I was like, you know what, guys, just to prove it to you that I actually do work and I have a job, I'm working with a phenomenal organization. My leaders have agreed to come on the show with us today. So we have the CEO of Adventist Health and the Chief Culture Officer at Adventist Health, Scott Reiner and Joyce Newmeyer. How are you guys doing today? Scott, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, sir. Yeah, I love your enthusiasm. You're pumped.
And I couple that with coffee. So just imagine with that. And Joyce, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here. I got coffee on board, so I'm with you.
That is so exciting. And guys, I'm thrilled to be talking to them about meaningful work because I feel that I am able to do what I do and have the experiences and the exposure that I have because of the work that I've seen Adventist Health do. The support that I got when I came in as a leadership resident myself, and the leaders that I had to encourage me and coach me and help me find what my strengths are, find out what my voice is, and really lean into those I owe that a lot to Adventist Health. And so I've been talking to a lot of different experts since we started the Late Afternoon Show last October, getting their viewpoints, getting their stories, kind of understanding what their journeys are, right? And how can we take lessons from their journeys to what we're doing, folks that are still trying to come up and figure it out. But I want to get an understanding of you guys' journey. Just if you guys can give us a quick, a fast-forwarded version. I mean, Scott, you're the CEO of a huge health system, right? This is not your mom and pop shop health system. This is a big organization, and you've been running it for a few years now. So talk to us a little bit about how you got to this position and what a day in the life looks like for a leader like yourself.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for the question. Yeah, well, it's been an interesting journey to get to this spot, and I can tell you, for those who think that they can plan their life out, I never planned to be doing what I'm doing right now. Strangely enough, and Joyce might know that we go back a little ways. This was not something that I had necessarily my path. However, my path started really in, I'm a nurse by background. So I started out in nursing, and I said take you through a whole career path, but it kind of started out, you're at this point in your career where you realize you've chosen something which I really enjoyed. And then you start to get some interest around what are the peripherals that go with that work in nursing. Well, so what happened pretty quickly was, hey, there's management associated with nursing. There's management and leadership associated with clinical things. And so kind of started on a path of getting progressive responsibilities. You start as a nurse manager, and then you run a unit, then you develop something. But it probably wasn't until, and I've worked various places, for-profits, organizations, nonprofit. Most of my career has been nonprofit, faith-based, but it was probably my first vice president job, to be honest with you. Ironically, it was at a location where Joyce was an executive there, and that was in Tennessee. So this is a while ago. I don't age myself, but that was at 94, 95, something like that. But it's first when you first move into that first vice president role, you start to realize you're over that hurdle of saying, I think I can do this work. And now you just a matter of really at that point getting a competency in leadership. At some point, because I think in my career I've had in healthcare, I've done about everything other than be the CFO. I pretty much have done almost all the other roles one time or another, technically or informally. So I think at that point you start the journey of figuring out yourself. figuring out leadership characteristics, things that motivate you, things that get you, gaps in your capabilities of leading people or making decisions, or, you start to figure out the things as you mature that are either enablers or hindrances to those who you're been asked to lead. And so that's been a long journey. I'm not going to take you to the technical journey of, what it's like to run a hospital and a hospital system. And so the day in the life of a CEO is crazy in healthcare. And it gets even crazier when you create a new strategy like we have of moving from a hospital company to a health and well-being company. And so, the day in the life, 2 years ago is very different than a day in the life now. A day in the life now really is about working closely with our executive team, who have very incredible responsibilities. It's focusing in on our strategy to make sure those things in our strategy are relevant, that they're moving, that we're actually making progress on it, connecting to the outside world in the industry, outside the industry, telling your story, trying to motivate, encourage when people get stuck, and they do. And Joyce will probably talk. People get stuck with change, and you're constantly being the ambassador for change, keeping hope alive when things are challenging. So I would call it a combination of any given day have to be a prophet, priest, or a king. Someday you have to foretell the future, even if you don't know. Sometimes you got to make decisions on really difficult things, and sometimes you're the boss, and it's. But you have to figure out at what moment you're what, and keep people with you. So my life varies from spent a lot of time over this last year and a half with the pandemic management. I'm the chairman of the California Hospital Association, which was heavily involved with helping the state of California government navigate through this, all the way through helping us build a new strategy, which includes the work of Joyce and bringing on culture. That's a new development for us as a chief culture officer. So I'll tell you, Tim, it's all over the place, but it's never the same twice.
You get a lot of variety. I've never heard that combination, prophet, priest, or king, in any given day, but it's good to see, right? We just got the announcement from the governor yesterday saying that California is, opened up again. I read an article saying that the GDP of California, nobody comes close, right? Like California was able to come through a pandemic, open its doors, vaccinating. I think it was like over 40 million people that were able to get the vaccinations. And Adventist Health as a system also was able to come out and still focus on strategy and growth and expansion and all those things. That is super exciting. Moving from, like you said, what we're talking about, a traditional hospitals system to being more of a health system, well-being, and focusing on the holistic part of the person versus just when they're sick, right? And so that's super exciting. And we mentioned, your role, Joyce, Chief Culture Officer. Now, you and I we work closely together. I'm actually in Joyce's division, so she's my boss's boss. No,
we are not that far apart.
But she is leading culture at Adventist Health. And when we had talked before, when you were kind of coming onto the team, you had described that this is like your best job. Like you're in a role that you are absolutely enjoying. So talk to us a little bit about what does it mean to build culture in an organization? What does that mean to you?
So our culture is both deceptively simple and complicated, right? It's simple in that a culture can be defined as the sum total of all of our words and behaviors. That's our culture. It's how we talk to each other, how we treat each other, how we talk to patients, how we treat them, how we talk to our communities. But it's our words and our behaviors. That means everything matters. Every conversation, everything matters. And a chief culture officer's job is to set up the understanding and the scenarios in which people can realize that everything matters.
Wow.
There is no, Disney calls it on and off stage. If you're going to create an intentional culture, there's no such thing as off stage.
It's always on.
It's always on.
Yeah.
Even a private conversation where you can, quote, let down your hair, be yourself.
Yeah.
even then, though, you are either creating culture or tearing it down.
Yeah.
There is no neutral.
Yeah. Wow.
Everything matters.
Wow. So a sum total of our, what was that? Behaviors
and words.
And so your role is like, okay, how do we, is it influence better behaviors, better words, like understanding, like how do we make those things reflect our mission? Like, so what is, if you were to say like, what is one key part of your job, what would you say?
Intentionality. It's about how do we create the culture that we want with our behaviors and words?
Okay.
And that's what we want intentionally. Because culture exists, whether you create it or not.
Yeah.
It is what it is. And if you don't do it intentionally, then it's going to grow up to be something that you may not recognize. It may not be what you intended, may not be what you want. So if we do it with intentionality, the words and the behaviors add up to then be what we want it to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is one thing that I have super appreciated about Adventist Health is just the intentionality. There's no lazy work, right? I mean, folks we're not just letting the tides like throw us one way or another. It's like, no, we own our mission, we own our culture, we own what we can do, and our responsibility to our patients, to our community, to our associates. And there's a lot of focused attention on that, which I absolutely love. And I want to talk to you guys a lot about what we're here for. What I've been trying to build over the last year is around meaningful work. But before we get into that, we're going to do something fun. Okay. All right. I love to ask my guests like some random questions. Sometimes they play games with me. Yesterday, I played trivia with our guests. We played Truth or Dare. We play Pictionary and all that stuff. Today, we're going to ask you guys to remember the last thing that made you laugh until your stomach hurt. If you can remember the last thing that made you laugh until your stomach hurt and share it with us, I would be delighted. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. Or do you want to go, Scott?
Well, I have one, and I watch it over and over again, and my wife thinks I'm crazy. So, sometimes ads are really funny, and sometimes you're just like, but there's a series of ads on Progressive called Dr. Rick Life Coach. It's called, Dr. Rick Parenta Life Coach, and it's how not to be your parents. And I don't know whether you've ever seen these clips. They're absolutely, you have to look it up on YouTube. They're absolutely hilarious. So he goes through like multiple vignettes. He's like a comic, right? But it's like the stand-up, like Second City TV or something. And these guys all come out of this stand-up comedy. He's hilarious. And he's coaching people that are of your age, more than mine, about how not to be your parents. So, simple things like they're going through a restaurant and he talks to the person, someone my age or older, and they always want to introduce themselves to the waiter. And he says, no one needs to know your name. It's not needed here. Or another one, if he walks into a room and there's like 20 pillows on a couch, you know what I'm saying? It's like, if you look at it, there's no place to sit. So no, we don't need these. All these pillows can go somewhere. People actually need to sit. Anyway, there's incredible little vignettes, and the funniest one is they're all funny, but one would be what was it? So if you had to print, how many in this room? So it's big auditorium. He's having this like professional coaching session. He's a speaker up front. He says, how many printed out instructions to get here today? And then all these hands went up, right? All my age, and he says, you are in the right place. So anyway. It's just pretty funny. So it kills me every time I watch it. So you have to watch it on YouTube. But maybe you have to be of a certain age to appreciate, say, my God, that's me, or that is my parents.
The reason I'm laughing so hard is because I always introduce myself in restaurants. Like I always waiter or waitress like, what's your name? And I introduce myself, and I was like, maybe it'll get me better service, maybe it'll do something. And I never thought about. I was like, oh my gosh, that's what my dad does, like all the time.
So he stops you and says, no, the waiter doesn't need to know your name.
Hey, Scott, is this the one where they hold up the signs that say things like live, laugh, love? Nobody needs a sign about this in their house. Put it in the
trash. all these little kitschy things, these little cute things, they put them in a trash can. They take them away.
Oh, I love it. And that reminds me, I know you guys are involved in some videos kind of internally. We're rolling out our well-being things and little TikTok clips. I mean, those videos made me laugh until my stomach hurt with like rolling out of our share care and things like that. So you guys were just amazing with that. Joyce, what about you? What was the last thing that made you laugh until your stomach hurt?
My sister and I, when we get together, we can't stop. We make each other laugh like nobody else can. And now I'm going to tell, my dad will never watch this, and so I'm going to tell a story on my dad. I wasn't there, but I would have given anything to have seen this. We lost our air conditioning. So my parents and my mother-in-law, who all live with us, they went to see a movie. And Dad forgot to wear a belt. And as he's exiting the theater with his leftover popcorn and his leftover drink, he's the first one out of the theater, and his shorts drop to the floor. And what do? It's like everybody's behind him. So he sets down the popcorn, sets down the drink, and pulls up his pants. And the theater was attached to a mall, so he marches right over to a store to buy a belt so he can get home safely. And I'm just imagining this, like, at the time, probably 82-year-old man dropping his shorts in the theater. And I'm trying to tell my sister about this, and we're laughing so hard we're crying. My husband took a video of me trying to tell her this story, and I thought we were both going to throw up. We were laughing so hard.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, who's going to drop their popcorn? I wouldn't either. You hold on to it. You paid good money.
He'd rather stand there in his tidy whities than lose his popcorn.
You're 82 years old. Who cares?
Priorities were set. I just got an ab workout, guys. So thank you for this exercise. Thank you so much for sharing that, guys. And so as we move into a conversation around meaningful work. So I've been a definition gatherer, if you would, and have been asking different folks, different leaders in different spaces, how they would define meaningful work. And so what I want to ask you guys individually is, A, how would you define it? And then based on that definition, how are you or Adventist Health applying that definition in the work that we're doing? So you went first on the story, so we'll go with you on your definition of meaningful work.
To me, meaningful work is whatever you do that positively impacts or changes the lives of other people. I believe we're placed here on this earth to worship our God and be there for each other,
right,
and help each other through this world, through this life. And so whatever you do that makes a difference, and meaningful work can be working in a coffee shop and being sure that you help someone start their day with a big smile and a positive connection. It can also be working in healthcare, as we do. And Scott talked about how we're taking a shift in our strategy from traditional healthcare to a health and well-being company. We're still going to provide health care. We're still going to have hospitals and clinics and do that exceptionally well. But we want to reach further into the lives of people to help them live their absolute best lives, and not just fix what is broken.
Right.
So, we get to do that in a way that touches and changes lives in very, very personal ways, right? I mean, people trust us with their lives, literally. And what a privilege it is to do that. It doesn't mean that you can't make that same kind of a difference in another industry, but it's very personal in our industry. What a privilege.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you, Joyce. What about you, Scott? How would you define it, and how are we using it here at Adventist Health?
Yeah, well, thank you. I love Joyce's comments, but it comes from a missional perspective. I would add, I would support that. For me too, it's really, I think, from a Christian tradition, it's really helping and advancing the lives of others, supporting. But I would also add that it needs to be really meaningful to you as an individual, because we can do a lot of things. Even in healthcare, you can do a lot of. You start with the great reasons, and you are supporting people, and they feel supported. But the individual actually doing the work may not be in the best spot. if you know what I mean. It may be that the work is not as meaningful to them as it once was, or they're doing it for the wrong reasons. I mean, that sounds kind of crazy. So meaningful work has to be meaningful authentically to who you are in your stage of life and what you're doing. And then obviously it's targeted and focused towards others, which is really, I think, the principle that Joyce talked about too. So meaningful work then is advancing the lives and support of others in a very authentic way that gives you joy, gives you purpose, gives you peace, gives you fulfillment. Because if you don't, I think you could be, especially in healthcare, you can see that healthcare, we're doing meaningful work, but you can, if you spend a lot of time with providers, sometimes they get a little tired underneath, or they could get a little jaded, or they get a little caustic. And that's when culture and experience breaks down, because the work itself is meaningful. But if the person doesn't find the meaning in the work who's doing it, it loses its edge. And we have to, as an employer, do both. We have to first manage up the people and help those who are actually delivering the work so they can actually deliver the work in a meaningful way to others. And that's the joy and the challenge of, 30-some thousand associates, because, not everybody's in that spot every day. A lot of people are, but then there are those who are not. And how do we create an environment culture that gets them to where it's really meaningful to them personally as well?
Absolutely. And I had the privilege of being invited to speak. So Adventist Health put on a nurse resilience conference in partnership with Pacific Union College last week. And so our Jackie, our chief nursing officer, was there and was talking about resilience, right? And how do we create a culture that supports and empowers and grows those aspects of resilience. There was some self-care and self-care methods that was shared. And I talked about the meaningful work environment. What is like you spoke of authenticity. How can you be your true self and have permission to, be your true self and bring that to work and have an environment that celebrates, that comes around that. And the right people, the trusting environment, the ability to grow and develop, pursue mastery, and just figuring out what your purpose is, right? If you look, there's a graphic that the Ikigai, I don't know if you've seen like the Japanese Ikigai graph, where it's like, what you love, what you're good at, what you can get paid for, what the world needs, and you mix all these things together, and you can either figure it out for yourself, hey, this is what my purpose is, or you can align yourself with an organization that is purpose driven and that can also fulfill that meaningfulness as well. So very excited to hear your definitions and excited to see that Adventist Health is very, again, intentional about doing that work for our community, for our associates. 30,000 associates, including providers. The communities that we impact across the West Coast and Hawaii it's no small deal. It's no small deal, and I think we take that seriously. So what is the best way? So with all the things that are going on, what is the best way that folks, outside of going to the hospital, right? What are the best way that folks can engage with Adventist Health to kind of learn some of the things that we're doing? Any recommendations that we can tell our audience?
Well, I can offer a couple. There's if you happen to live in a community where one of our hospitals or some of our clinics are, there are things going on in the community that have nothing to do with an appointment for healthcare. Mm-hmm. So they're engaged in all kinds of community education, community involvement, whether it's something that even other organizations or a public health department, any of those things that we're part of that, right, if we're there in that community. If we're not in one of those communities, there are still ways through our online presence that you engage with what Adventist Health is up to.
Right.
We have a news story website.
Nice.
That's you can get there from our main page at Adventist Health. And we actually produce films about some of the experiences that people tell us about, whether they're patients, whether they're other community members. Sometimes it's associates or providers, some of our own physicians and nurse practitioners. They tell us stories that help illustrate our why,
nice,
our purpose. Why do we do what we do? This is hard. There are a lot easier ways to earn a living than working in healthcare, right? Or health and well-being. And Yet they tell us these stories about things that have changed their lives or circumstances that they've been a part of, and they can't even believe this happened.
Yeah.
We're actually producing films about this because we believe entire civilizations have been passed down by telling stories.
True.
We can build culture, we can build community, and create meaning, Mr. Meaningful Work, by telling stories and doing a better job of sharing how you can make a difference.
Very cool. Very cool. Anything to add to that, Scott?
No, I just maybe you can think the kind of the macro and then at the staff level. I mean, so yes, I think you're going to start seeing movements if you're a student of the industry of some of the things Adventist Health's doing. It's going to look different than some other health systems or hospital systems. We're going to start going into new spaces. We're going to have more commentary and things about community health and improvement. It's being intentionally designed. How do we create influence in a community through policy, through advocacy, through actual work? But then I think what Joyce is the most impactful, right, is when our associates and providers can tell stories, because that probably creates the most impact. So I think I would look, hopefully we can, people can see through their colleagues, those who are associated with us, and get stories to what they're doing and how they're doing it. But hopefully also on the outside, you'll start to see signals that Adventist Health is really creating a different kind of a model, if you will, for healthcare.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Check out those signals. Look for the signs of the changing times. Well, Scott, Joyce, thank you guys so much for joining us on this episode of the Late Afternoon Show. Folks, if you resonated with anything that was shared here today, by way of the work that Adventist Health is doing, meaningful work, some of the topics on building culture, leadership that Scott had shared, and that journey and the transition, let us know. You can email me, Tim at MrMeaningfulWork.com. You can leave a message in the comments. If there's anything that you recommend or suggest and say, hey, we would like to see more of this, or we'd like to see less of this, let us know as well. And we just want to make sure that you are living a meaningful life. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Great job.
All right.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap.